Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy. Alright guys, it is time to talk about The Last of Us. Now in case you didn't know, people are really excited about this show because it's an adaptation of one of the best and most beloved video games of the last decade. Now the game has earned a lot of praise because frankly, it is a masterclass in well-crafted story and complex character development. The Last of Us takes place in a post-apocalyptic world where a parasitic fungus turned most of humanity into terrifying mind-controlled mutants. This world is rich with lore, factions, and some truly incredible characters. So here's everything you need to know about The Last of Us and why you should be excited for this show.
So is that everything you hoped for?
Jury's still out. But man, can't deny that view.
So usually with these kinds of videos, we do like a full recap of the story, but we're not going to do that with The Last of Us. We just don't want to ruin that amazing story. So instead, we will tell you everything you need to know about The Last of Us without any major spoilers. Now the game The Last of Us came out in 2013. It won like all the awards. It sold millions of copies, and it's received unanimous acclaim and is considered to be one of the greatest video games ever made. The Last of Us takes place 20 years after an outbreak called the cordyceps brain infection. It invades the brain and basically controls and turns people into hyper-aggressive monsters.
So it's Twitter?
Not exactly, but you might be onto something there. So when people are infected with cordyceps, a parasitic fungus begins growing in their brains. It then hijacks the mind, turning humans into hostile hosts that eventually transform into these abominations. But that's a very short oversimplification of cordyceps, and we'll get into the nitty-gritty of that infection in just a little bit. The story of The Last of Us is about Joel Miller and Ellie Williams. Joel is a broken man. He's a ruthless smuggler who's tasked with transporting Ellie across the country in search of a cure. Ellie is immune to the infection. The game was created by Neil Druckmann and it was developed by Naughty Dog, the same studio that created games like Crash Bandicoot and the Uncharted series. Also, full disclosure, I should say that my brother-in-law is a level designer at Naughty Dog. In fact, he included my cat in The Last of Us 2 right here. But that has no effect on my opinion of these games. In 2014, the game received a DLC that was titled Left Behind. Now, in case you have no idea what a DLC means, it's an expansion pack for the original game, stands for downloadable content. The story of Left Behind takes place both before and during the events of the first game. The first season of The Last of Us show is an adaptation of the first game and Left Behind. There's also the American Dreams graphic novel that came out in 2013, and it serves as a prologue for Left Behind. In 2020, The Last of Us Part 2 came out. Now, unlike the first game, the sequel was very divisive among fans. Some love it, some hate it, most are somewhere in between, like most things nowadays.
I know you wish things were different. I wish things were different. But they ain't.
Despite some of the negative responses the game got, Part 2 is still a very successful game, receiving a lot of praise and winning many game awards. Personally, I love it, and it will be interesting to see how Part 2 is going to be adapted for the show. And speaking of, we have a video coming out soon about The Last of Us Part 2 that will explain some of the controversy surrounding the game and our own feeling on the story, so stay tuned for that. So at this point, The Last of Us Part 3 is not confirmed yet, but the game is very likely to happen, especially if the show is a major hit.
Please, be good to me. Please.
This brings us to the show. An adaptation for The Last of Us was in the works for pretty much since the game first came out. At some point, Sam Raimi was even involved in a movie adaptation. And now, finally, HBO is giving us what looks like a very faithful adaptation of one of the greatest video games ever made. The show is helmed by Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin. Druckmann created the game, and Mazin is the creative mind behind Chernobyl, yet another great HBO series.
So what even is the big deal about the game?
Wait, you've never played Last of Us Part 2?
Nope.
How come?
Got no thumbs.
Yeah, you're right, my bad. Alright, so let me make it up to you with a breakdown of what The Last of Us is all about.
You make every shot count. Yeah.
I got this.
But first, we have to talk about the most important aspect of The Last of Us, and that is the story of Joel and Ellie. Joel is
A Mandalorian who protects a little green baby named Yoda.
No, that's what Pedro Pascal does in a galaxy far, far away. Joel from The Last of Us is more of
A grizzled old Jedi who protects baby Leia.
Nope, that's still Star Wars, and Leia is not a baby. And before you say it, he's not a Witcher either.
Toss the car into your Witcher.
20 years after the outbreak, Joel is working with his partner, Tess, as black market smugglers in the Boston quarantine zone. After the cordyceps outbreak, the military and FEDRA, that's short for the Federal Disaster Response Agency, declared martial law over the USA. They rule over oppressive quarantine zones all across the country. Now, after a job goes wrong, Joel and Tess are hired by a woman named Marlene to smuggle Ellie out of the quarantine zone. Marlene is the leader of the Fireflies, a militia group that revolts against military oppression. Although their hands aren't clean either. The effects of the infection have so much world building. Joel and Tess discover that Ellie was bitten infected, and yet she didn't turn. Anyone who's infected turns within 2 days, but Ellie was bitten 3 weeks before the events of the game, meaning she's immune.
It's 3 weeks old.
No, everyone turns within 2 days, so you stop bullshitting.
It's 3 weeks.
The Fireflies plan to reverse engineer Ellie's immunity and create a cure. And so, Joel is tasked with escorting Ellie across a very dangerous country and delivering her to the Fireflies. At first, Joel is skeptical about the cure. He lost faith in humanity, and he's done a lot of things over the past 2 decades that have robbed him of his humanity. But Joel creates a connection with Ellie, and their journey is a truly powerful and heartbreaking story. The Last of Us is at its best when exploring the hard choices these characters have to make. This is something that we see a lot of in these types of stories. It's not just characters making hard choices, it's the way The Last of Us depicts the consequences of those choices. And the beauty of it is that these choices, no matter how terrible and unjustified, always make sense in the context of who these characters are. And the ending, man, I really don't want to spoil the ending. All I will say is that it's one of the most brilliant and shocking endings I've ever seen in any story, not just a video game.
I gotta tell you, it was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
The Last of Us will break your heart and crush your soul. And then, once you're curled up in a corner, forming a pool of tears around you, The Last of Us will tell you that it's all going to be all right. And then it will curb stomp what's left of your spirit and kick you right in the... Alright, so Last of Us is bleak and soul-crushing at times, but there are also moments like these.
Light on the reading, but it's got some interesting photos.
Now, Ellie, that ain't for kids.
Whoa! How the hell would he even walk around with that thing?
Get rid of that.
But hey, this is a post-apocalyptic story. Things are meant to be dark and grim. So this brings us to what made this world so bad. The pandemic in Last of Us is called cordyceps brain infection, CBI for short. It's a mutated variant of a parasitic fungus that only infected insects, turning them into mind-controlled zombies. Now this is something that actually exists in the real world, and it's the source of inspiration in the game. Seriously, like this is terrifying.
Holy God, what are you showing me? His head. Come on!
The fungus releases parasitic spores, infecting humans and invading their minds, and begin growing into a parasitical fungus.
I collect spores, molds, and fungus.
This fungus hijacks the mind, turning the host into a hyper-aggressive, mind-controlled mutant who's programmed to do only one thing: spread and infect. The infection spreads through spores in the air or saliva that transfers through bite marks. In 2013, the mutated strain of cordyceps started infecting humans throughout crops in South America. The infection spread rapidly, and on September 26th, Outbreak Day, cordyceps became a pandemic that killed or infected 60% of humanity within months. Now, there are 4 stages of cordyceps. Stage 1 starts within 2 days of a human being infected. The fungus begins to alter the host's brain, turning them into extremely hostile and violent people. They charge and attack any non-infected they see. That is why they are called runners. The infected lose their higher brain functions as well as their humanity, though they are still alive. So there are no undead zombies in The Last of Us. The infected enter stage 2 within 2 weeks, transforming into the stalkers. Now at this point, the fungus begins to sprout out of the infected's heads, usually through one of their eyes, and it covers some parts of their body. Unlike runners, stalkers are stealthy. They hide and stalk their prey inside dark buildings until they ambush their victims. Stage 3 starts about a year into the infection, and this is called the clickers stage. The fungus grows out of the host's brains, creating this horrifying flower-like growth on their faces. Now, since their face is deformed, they don't have eyes. With their ruined eyesight, the infected start developing a type of animalistic echolocation. They use a clicking sound that acts like a freaky sonar to locate their prey. The fungus starts to cover their host bodies, creating a type of scale armor that makes them deadly and resilient. Clickers are also much stronger than regular humans. And then there's stage 4.
That's a big boy.
Hosts who survive for over a decade transform into bloaters. At this point, the fungal growth covers their whole body, become a hardened fungal armor. Bloaters are very rare since most hosts die before stage 4. In Last of Us Part 2, it's revealed that there are other variants of the infected. The first is the shamblers. Now these are variants of the bloaters. They are mutated because of exposure to high amounts of water. There's also the superorganism infected known as the Rat King.
He's the Rat King.
Somehow, multiple infected merge together to create this tangled monstrosity. Even after the infected hosts die, the fungus keeps growing. It transforms the host corpse into a fungal plant that releases spores into the air that will further infect humans. These cordyceps plants usually grow indoors, so the survivors must wear gas masks to not be infected. Since Ellie is immune to infection, she can breathe in the spores without needing a mask. Unfortunately, the spores have been removed from the show. Neil Druckmann revealed that the spores won't exist in the adaptation. Instead of airborne spores, the infection will spread through a type of fungus tendrils. Now, I gotta be honest, the change is a little disappointing. The spores made the infection in the games feel unique and much scarier, but let's all keep an open mind and see how this is executed in the show. Now let's talk about the show itself. The first season will consist of 9 episodes. From what we've seen and heard so far, the show will be a fairly faithful adaptation of the first game, as well as Left Behind. The DLC story will be adapted into the 8th episode. But like with every adaptation, there will be some changes. We already talked about the removal of the spores, and they also adjusted the timeline. In the game, the outbreak happens in 2013, but they changed the year to 2003 for the show. With the 20-year time jump, the events of the show will take place in 2023, same year as us.
When you're adapting something like a video game, changes have to be done smartly. We are telling more. There is so much in between.
The show will include stories and characters that were scrapped from the original game. There are also a few new characters that were created specifically for the show. Now, speaking of, let's go over some of the characters that you will need to know for the show. Pedro Pascal is Joel. So far, the show's Joel seems to be very game accurate, but the writers added a new element to his character. Joel will be hard of hearing in one of his ears because of a gunshot. According to Craig Mazin, they wanted to make Joel less superhuman than he is in the game and to show the consequences of people living in a post-outbreak world. Bella Ramsey is Ellie. Now, you probably remember her as the amazing Lyanna Mormont from Game of Thrones.
You were named for my Aunt Lyanna, who said she was a great beauty. I'm sure you will be too.
I doubt it. My mother wasn't a great beauty or any other kind of beauty. She was a great warrior, though.
Ellie is very clever and witty for her age. Since Ellie grew up in a harsh world, she's used to violence and she's willing to kill if she has to. Still, the life she leads has taken a serious toll on her, and she suffers from an abandonment complex after she lost most of the people she loved. In the games, Joel is played by Troy Baker, who's one of the most popular and best video game voice actors like ever. Baker will not reprise his role as Joel, but he will appear as a different character called James, a member of the group of survivors that are led by a guy named David. All I can really say is that these guys are really nasty. In the show, David's actor is Scott Shepard, and in the game, David was voiced by the one and only Nolan North, who is known for Nathan Drake from the Uncharted series.
Drake has been spotted in Sector 18.
Oh, crap. Any chance this is Sector 19?
Ashley Johnson played Ellie in the game, and she also will play a different character in the show, a character called Anna. She's described as a pregnant woman who must give birth under terrifying circumstances. But here's the thing, in the games, Ellie's mother's name was Anna, meaning that Johnson is playing Ellie's mother in the show, and this is so perfect. Ashley Johnson gave life to Ellie in the games, and now her character will give life to Ellie in the show. If Anna is indeed Ellie's mother, that means that we will get a flashback to her birth, and that could finally reveal why Ellie is immune to cordyceps, something that wasn't fully explained in the games. Anna Torv is playing Tess. Now, she's Joel's partner. They met in the Boston QZ, and Tess got Joel into black market smuggling. Now, you probably know Torv from Fringe. Tess was voiced by Annie Wersching in the games, but the actress will not be in the show. Merle Dandridge is playing Marlene, and she is the leader of the Fireflies. Merle Dandridge has previously played the same character in the games, and she's the only actor that's reprising their role from the game. Gabriel Luna is playing Tommy, who is Joel's younger brother. Now, Joel did some really terrible things in the past, and it drove Tommy away from his older brother, who couldn't accept the person that Joel had become. Tommy was played by Jeffrey Pierce, who will appear in the show as a character called Perry. He's a new character that wasn't in the games, who has a key role in this series. Joel's daughter Sarah is played by Nico Parker, and that's all we can say about her without ruining the story. Now, that being said, it's something that was revealed in a recent behind-the-scenes video, so if you don't want to hear any spoilers about it, skip to this time code. Still with us? Okay.
I don't save Sarah's life, which is Joel's daughter, which is the event that shapes the character for the rest of his life.
Sarah is killed at the start of The Last of Us. She is shot by a soldier who thinks that she and Joel might be infected. Sarah was played by Hannah Hayes in the game. Now Nick Offerman is playing Bill. Bill has mechanical skills that fit perfectly for the post-apocalyptic world. He lives alone in an abandoned town filled with deadly traps that were created by him. He's got a working relationship with Joel and Tess, and he owes Joel many favors. In the game, Bill is played by W. Earl Brown, who you probably recognize as Dan Doherty from Deadwood.
I don't have the patience for this bullshit. I have had a tough day.
Bill's arc in the show is said to include major changes from the game. The main one is the inclusion of a character called Frank, and he will be portrayed by Murray Bartlett. The third episode will focus on the story of Bill and Frank. So the existence of Frank is a bit of a spoiler, so if you don't want to know anything that might ruin the story for you, skip ahead again to this time code. Still with us? Okay. In the game, Joel and Ellie seek out Bill for a working car. During a conversation, it's revealed that Frank is dead. He committed suicide after he was bitten.
Who the hell's Frank?
He was my partner.
But Frank will be alive in the show, so this means that we will get a flashback that will expand on Bill and Frank's story and explore what happened to Frank before his death. Or Frank's role could be drastically different in the show. Murray Bartlett is a fantastic actor. I loved him in White Lotus, so I'm glad that he and Nick Offerman are going to have more time to shine. Some fans will probably be very unhappy about any divergence from the games, but I find that making some changes from the source material is actually a great thing, as long as these changes further enrich the story. Like, for example, Shane in The Walking Dead. He had a very small role in the graphic novel, but the show gave him an incredible 2-season arc. Same with the fantastic scenes between Arya and Tywin in Game of Thrones, something that wasn't in the books. Additions like these expand on the source material without compromising it. Besides, this way fans who already experienced the story in the games can get some surprises and new elements to the story. Anyways, moving on to other key characters. The brothers, Henry and Sam, will be played by Lamar Johnson and Kevon Woodward. In the game, Joel and Ellie meet them in Pittsburgh. But according to the brothers' description in the show, they are hiding in Kansas City, Missouri. They are hunted by a revolutionary movement that's seeking vengeance against them. They are probably a different group than the Fireflies. Now in the game, Henry and Sam are dealing with a group called the Hunters. Melanie Linsky is the leader of this group. She's playing a new character called Kathleen, and she's the leader of a revolutionary movement in Kansas City. Finally, Storm Reed will play Riley Abel. Riley is Ellie's friend who appears in the Left Behind DLC, and in the show she'll appear in episode 8. Left Behind revealed that Ellie is a lesbian, and she and Riley have a really sweet story.
Very controversial topic.
So that's some of the characters that you need to know about, but one other person who's returning from the games is Gustavo Santaolalla. He composed the outstanding music for the game, so I'm very happy that he will make music for the show. So that's everything you need to know about The Last of Us without spoiling and ruining the incredible story that you're going to experience for yourself. What do you guys think about The Last of Us? Did you play the games, or will the show be your first experience with the story? Let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.